The most important one is number one, believing that you actually deserve it. That's probably most paramount.
Welcome, everyone, to the Promoted Podcast with Denise Harris. I'm your host, Denise Harris, and today we are talking to Morgan Cato, who is a sports influencer, business executive, and change agent. In June 2022, Morgan joined the Phoenix Suns executive group as assistant general manager and VP of basketball operations, making her one of the league's highest ranking women in a front office and the first woman of color to hold the title. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Oh my gosh, thank you for that intro. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Well, it's great to see you, and thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to Promoted.
Thank you. I'm excited for this. This is wonderful, and congratulations to you. This is wonderful that you're creating this platform. This is great. This is wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. Morgan, tell us a little bit about you and how did you get started in basketball?
Oh my goodness. So basketball started early. I'm a New York City bred kid coming from Caribbean and Southern roots, and basketball was everywhere around me growing up in the concrete jungle. And early on, I fell in love with the sport. Just everything from the tournaments to the dominance on the court to what it did for the community, the impact, and then also had family members who played as well. So I got the chance to have a front row seat to really see how sport can impact life, but more than anything with basketball. So it started very, very early. And even going back to that point, I think the most influential change was getting a chance to meet Coach John Thompson, who recruited my cousin to come play at Georgetown. And I remember this Goliath of a man coming into my grandmother's house and taking up the full doorway. And in this order, he said, "Mrs. Spellman, your grandson is going to become a stand-up man. He's going to have a world-class education, and he's going to play basketball." And as I thought about it, I'm thinking this sport can do things. And it had me hooked from there.
Morgan, I gather that you are someone who's not afraid to navigate in uncharted territory. And certainly breaking into the NBA, which is a very male dominated industry in the way that you have. And by the way, congratulations on that.
Thank
Is a
you.
huge accomplishment. Can you share the pivotal moments in your career that led you to become the assistant general manager of the Phoenix Suns? Because, it ain't easy. So how did you get to the point where you were even being looked at?
Yeah, it isn't an easy journey. And I recognize just how, I guess, challenging or the Goliath of, just the career trajectory is when I look in retrospect. But when I was going through it, the only thing that's always been first and foremost for me is following the work. Like, as you talked about me being unafraid, unapologetic, and fearless in doing the things that I love, that's genuinely how I feel about sport and also how I feel about people. And in my career, I've had the chance to use sport and basketball more than anything to amplify people. So when you think about those two combined areas in one space, I can't contain myself. Literally.
Yeah, I can feel it.
Yeah, it's just something within my spirit. So essentially, my curiosity and my understanding and desire to continue amplifying basketball and people and the product connected to sport kept me curious, kept me asking questions, kept me wanting to be engaged, kept me thinking about solutions, not being afraid to reach out to someone to ask a question or not being afraid to reach out to someone to offer my input or my thoughts on things. And essentially that's how I think my path was woven to some degree. And as a faithful woman, I also believe that my path is already defined. The steps may not be as clear, but I already knew that this is the way I should be going. So I just leaned into that. And it's when you look back and you're like, oh, you came from all the way down there, or you did all that. Like, that's when I really have the moment of recognizing just how grand the journey has been to date.
Yeah. Well, you've shattered some significant barriers in the sports industry. How did you navigate those challenges and maintain your confidence in spaces where you might have been unrepresented?
Oh, often in the case. I wasn't
Okay.
represented essentially when you think about demographics as a woman or as a woman of color. But as a thought leader in sport and in basketball, and as someone who was avid in understanding the game and understanding the growth of the game, I was in my sweet spot. So I essentially lean into the things that I'm comfortable with, recognizing that I have differences. But I think it's those differences that continue to make me a valued asset in the space. It's having a different thought process. It's coming from a different background. It's always having the ability to be a constant learner and
Yeah.
take me to the next step. So
Mhm.
I don't think I spent as much time focusing on my differences more than focusing on what I can contribute. I
Yeah.
also don't deny that I do feel those to some degree when I'm in rooms. You know, you notice sometimes how camaraderie works or how people tend to flock to things that are more similar to them, whether it be school affinity or team affinity or people that they've worked with previously or tenure or time being with others. So in many cases, I may have been the newbie to this, but I lean into essentially what I do know. I lean into my curiosity, my wanting to know about other people and how I can continue to support and amplify. So I try not to get in my head. And
Yeah.
that we have to be really, really intentional about that because it is so easy to talk yourself out of wanting to say hello.
Yeah.
It is so easy to
Yeah.
talk yourself out of wanting to do a game recap or asking someone for time or even offering an opinion or showing your currency in a space. So it's definitely the Jedi mind tricks that
Yeah.
I think we've all mastered.
I mean, I think that, the inner dialogue that you talk about, kind of staying out of your head is really a big component, isn't it? Because, I mean,
Absolutely.
what we tell ourselves, we believe to be true.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So for you, what's one of the most surprising lessons that you learned that perhaps you wish you would have known earlier?
Learning how to read the room. That
Learning how to read the room. Say
That,
more.
that's a huge lesson. I had my first experience with, I guess, what you would say, a lack of self awareness to some degree before I started working in sports. This is when I was still working in investment banking and financial services. And I was working on a specific project and extremely avid about solutions. And coming to, this is now New York City, prime Wall Street time, the long rectangular tables, and me as at just an early manager level, I come into this room, I take a seat, and I'm ready to pitch. And what I wasn't aware of was my surroundings, essentially my tone, my positioning, where I actually sat in the room. I was so mission critical that was a lesson I hadn't yet learned. And it was because of, I guess, my ambition in the space and to some degree, my dominance as a younger professional with seasoned, tenured people that they were just taken aback and they
Mm.
missed holistically what I was positioning and offering because they just were not ready for that dynamic. And to the point, some of the feedback that came from the meeting was, who did I think I was? Specifically about where I sat and my tone and the dominance to some degree. But I had a great leader at the time, and she was Australian, and she said, "Mate, don't stop." She said, "Just learn to read the room." And from that time on, I did my due diligence in understanding who I'm going to be meeting with, how they like to be engaged. Do they enjoy the small talk? Do they just want to get directly to the point? Is it a setting where they're going to be the thought leader and the thinker and have to figure out how to circumnavigate that space, but still to get to the solution? So it was a great lesson. I wish I learned it a little bit earlier, but it's been such a wonderful part of my toolkit to success.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it's interesting too, Morgan, because sometimes we can hear feedback that can either push us forward
Yeah.
or keep us stuck. How important is that in terms of getting feedback from people, and how do you determine like what feedback is good? I mean, how can you sort of identify what's going to be helpful as you move forward?
Yeah. I love feedback, because as I mentioned, just being a constant learner, this business is constantly evolving. So if I'm not learning from either people who are more junior for me or people who have done it, then I'm doing myself and whoever I'm serving, business, product, etc., a disservice. I think all feedback is good. In that matter, some of it you'll use to your advantage, and then some of it is a aha moment. I know exactly where that person stands, and I know how to work with them. There's the way they say, hey, you deal with someone with a long handled spoon. I'll
Right.
take it all because I'll know how to position it, how to use it, whether I need to count you as an ally and an advocate, or you're someone that I need to worry about or think about in a different capacity as a blocker. So
Yeah.
any way you receive the feedback, it's always good, but it is, to your point, how do you determine using it? And then even in those circumstances where you may have not the most positive experience with someone, with a leader, or with a group, etc., you can't let it get you down. That's the most important thing. Sometimes we all experience roadblocks, or hurdles, and sometimes it may prevent us from continuing to move forward. It's very easy, I think, particularly for sometimes women, more than men, to have paralysis by analysis. We overthink things way too much, and sometimes we're, a little shy of just executing. But
Yeah.
you take it and you keep moving. Keep
Yeah.
moving.
You really raise a good point, and it makes me think about that, that process around when there's a promotion, men will be 50% or 60% ready for it and still go for the promotion. But women tend to have to feel like we need to be 100% prepared, ready, skilled up before we actually show up. What do you think about that?
I think that's a true reality. And we use the word feel. I don't think it's so much feel, it is the truth. I'm someone who has lived that. I continuously make sure that I am over prepared. What I don't do though is stop myself from moving, even if I'm not just 150%. But it's very easy to not want to continue to put yourself out there or take a risk. I think the reason for so many of those dynamics, it goes to a lot of currency, relationship currency,
Mm,
relatability, and otherness. In many cases in these rooms, when it comes to decision makers, I'm sure you've experienced it as well in your career, that from a gender perspective, usually women are outnumbered when it comes to who is an executive that either controls the budget line or the decision making. So I think in many cases with men, there's a comfortability just because there is familiarity in
right.
that space versus, okay, is this uncharted territory? Now, I would never, make full assumptions or, cast such a broad stroke where you can say everyone moves the same way, because you have plenty of women who are outliers and they're just gunning for it and they get it every single time. And then you'll have plenty of men also who are sometimes a little bit more hesitant and need to figure out, how do I work through it? How do I churn through it? Where do I find the confidence? But
Yeah.
overwhelmingly, as you look at these two classes of people, you will find more men who are more comfortable moving in their element based on relationship currency, and then also our environment. When we
Yeah.
look around us, whether it be from a political landscape or just from a true ecosystem, this song, this is a man's world.
Yeah.
If from the time that you are literally given life, you are welcomed into a space and an area where it's really made for you by law, by social norms, etc., there's a different comfortability. So I don't think it's always as inherent. I don't think it's always as conscious. I think it's just something that environmentally is integral in how people move, and that's just more work for us to do. It's not impossible. It just means that we need to continue to do the work to shift what representation looks like in these spaces and help our counterparts and other leaders to understand what it means to really welcome otherness and be inclusive and have a diverse thought process when it comes to having great talent with you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, but it also makes me think about the importance of curating relationships, right?
Mhm.
You know, developing relationships, developing a network. And I feel like, as an executive coach who works with so many leaders and particularly women, we don't necessarily pay as much attention to developing those networks and those crucial relationships, particularly when we're looking at how we elevate our career. How important was that for you?
I believe that became more important for me as I continued to rise through the ranks. And you're spot on, 100% spot on. For many of us, when you think about what the rules are or the keys to success, it's 1 + 1 = 2. It's quantifiable. What are the things that I need to have that are measurable to make sure that I am qualified and competent? So whether it be experience, tenure, educational background, roles, specific things that you can quantify. Those are the rules that were given to us. This is what you need to do to survive, to grow, to thrive. At no point in that equation did anyone ever say, make sure that this person's your friend. Make sure you have this in common with that person. That wasn't part of it. If
Yeah.
anything, I think we were kind of conditioned to steer away from that, focus on the work. You separate your personal life and your work life.
Good
It took
point.
me years to develop true friendships and work. And I don't mean, the social, quick, small talks. I mean, intimate friendships around details, families, life, partners, mind health, wellness, weight, image, the way we show up, how you lean into others for help, how you actually might run an idea by someone, how you would lean into a vulnerable space. Years. It wasn't until I was more seasoned in my career where I recognized the value of that. And I almost probably shied away from using some of my personal currency and spaces to continue to move because I was mission critical on the work. I think for many women and others, as you're trying to ascend, we have to recognize that's also part of our superpower. Women control the purchasing power in their homes. In many cases, they control the entertainment dollars, the recreational spend, what people eat, how people move, what your kids subscribe to, what they take into. Those are all superpowers that we haven't figured out how to utilize. So I think as we lean into that a bit more and round that out with all of our other quantifiable and tangible skills, you can't stop us. Not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Powerful. I mean, look at politics today. We won't get into that in
Yeah.
this moment, but really, really powerful. So, Morgan, the theme of the podcast is obviously about getting promoted. What mindset shifts have helped you stand out and position yourself for growth? And particularly in a competitive industry. And you've been talking a lot about that. We've talked about mentors and we've talked about building relationships. We've talked about, being fearless, and we've talked about leveraging our strengths and our superpowers. But ultimately, there's also sort of a mindset that you have to have, you know, when you are doing something that is hard. And really, I like to sort of think about it pushing a boulder uphill.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There has to be a positive perspective on anything that you're working on. If you go into any sort of project, task, a promotion, a role, something that you want to contribute to in an elevated level, if you have or move with any degree of doubt or uncertainty that it cannot be accomplished, that is your largest Achilles heel. Like I think when I move into things, I am always mission critical on how do we find success? How do we win? How do we become solution oriented? So if your compass is already moving through a positive lens, you have no room for the doubt. You have no room to say, okay, hey, I can't get it done. It's more about the how and the who, the where, the what, the when. It's all of those pieces that you need, but it's not if. You can't let it be an if. And I think there's so many times in our life that when we don't see it or we don't feel that it may be tangible or accomplished, the doubt comes into if I can do this, can I actually do it? You have to also intentionally remove words like that from your vocabulary because they are
Yes.
cancerous. They will keep you down, they will block your blessing.
Yes.
And what is for you, I firmly also believe that what is for you, but it's only if you believe that you can have it. Like if you believe it, you can receive it. That's what the scripture says. That's what the word says.
Right.
So if you're leaning with if, that's your biggest blocker to promotion. It's not if, it's when. Lean into the affirmative. And I think I've naturally done that just in, all of my settings. As an athlete, I was a captain of my high school basketball team. It wasn't, if I'm going to do this, it's when and how. So if you condition and reframe your mindset to actually believing that you can have it, you deserve it. There's a path that you need to get it. There might be some relationships. There's a little bit more work. This person may not want to help you, but somebody else will.
Right.
You really have to change that mindset. And then there's nothing that can stop you when you believe it.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that it's really essential to believe in yourself, to
Oh,
have
yes.
faith in yourself, to be willing to bet on yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as I kind of chronicle back, I really like I'd be lying if I would say I was so calculated and so methodical and being able to speak or think this in my junior years or even in mid-management time frame. It wasn't that. I just really believed that I had something to offer and I deserved it and I know I could and I could do the work and there wasn't anything that was going to prevent me from wanting to have success. But
Mhm.
I didn't have this roadmap.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have these keys. I wish that as a young adult, it was easier to navigate the space or, really understand truly what a mentor is or what a sponsor is and have the trust. That's another thing. People can talk about all of these different roles and in title and in ethos, but if you don't really trust the relationship or trust the person, then it goes nowhere fast. I didn't know how to do that when I was younger.
Yeah.
I just knew that I had to figure out how to get the work done. I didn't know how to ask for help. I thought I had to do it all on my own. I'm the kind of person that was first in, last out. And really had to learn along the way that in order to continue having success, you have to lean, on other people, lean into other people. I thought that that was a weakness. I thought that that would expose me as
Mm.
someone that didn't have all of the pieces. And it's very easy, I think, for some of us to still stay in that space a bit, feeling like you need to conquer it all or prove it all on your own. And in some cases, your strength is in numbers, but it's learning how to do that and learning how to contribute. So I would never, say that I had it and I
Yeah.
knew how to do it. I stumbled,
Yeah.
I scraped my knee. I may not have always gotten the feedback or, the full, yes, this is wonderful immediately. Like it took work,
Yeah.
but I think it's learning from those experiences and taking it and turning them into assets that have allowed me to continue doing well in the space.
Absolutely. And I think you raise a really good point there, Morgan, because part of it is that your career, navigating your career is never a linear path. I mean,
Correct.
it's not straight and narrow. Instead, it's squiggly. And I
Yes,
think that's what you're talking about in terms of, what you know at 25 is different than what you know at 30 and how you begin to move at 35 and so on. Right. I
absolutely.
mean, that it is a very squiggly road ahead. And part of it is really being able to understand how to navigate the ups and downs and how not to let yourself get stuck by rejection or get stuck because somebody told you something that didn't fit with what you believed about yourself, but to
Absolutely.
always stay in action and keep going.
For sure.
So tell
Sure.
me something. What three things do you think women should keep in mind when they want to be promoted to these higher level positions?
Three things. If I had to think about, I think the most important one is number one, believing that you actually deserve it. That's probably most paramount, really
Wow.
truly believing and removing the doubt from if I should get this or this person might have been better for me or he was allowed to present in meetings or that person finished the deck. There are so many reasons for why we'll talk ourselves out of something that we deserve. So the first one is believing it. I think the second one from promoting is knowing who you need to have in your corner to
Mm,
really champion for you and advocate for you and have exposure to your worth to make sure that you are getting what you receive. And then the last one is honestly not stopping at just that promotion. How many of us only think that I just want to get to be a director or I just want to get to this? We sometimes think in very finite, small,
yeah,
quantifiable spaces. We deserve it all.
yeah.
why
Wow.
not why not go into it thinking that yes you can do that. And I'm someone that I'm talking to myself, when did I ever really think to say, okay, I am going to help run a front office for a professional sport team? I didn't have the words to think that. I spent time thinking about what I did not have. I recognized that I was not a professional former athlete. I was not a white male. I was not an attorney. I did not go to an esteemed, astute university. I could tell you all these things that I thought I didn't have, but that wasn't going to help me. What was going to
Right.
help me was figure out, well, what the hell do you do well? What are you great at? What are your superpowers? And it was leaning into all that that made me think about, no, I can actually do this work. And it wasn't always thinking about, I just want this title. It
Yeah.
was more of thinking about, where can I have the influence and the currency? Where can I continue to do great work in spaces? I've had a former leader who, came to me and said, you know what, Morgan, I see it. I can see you being a general manager, in this space and, leading a team. It took a while, but I get it. And I looked at him and I think I kind of cocked my head a little bit to the right. And he said, oh, well, what does that look for? And I said, I don't know if I necessarily want to be a general manager. I don't know if that's just what I want. What I want to do is lead a world class, high performing sport organization and contribute to wins and success that have impact in spaces. And how do I continue to shape that? That
Yeah,
might not be in the title of a general manager.
that's right.
That might be in some other capacity or some other way. So I think as I've gotten older, I've given myself a little bit more room and grace to think creatively about how I can contribute to success of an organization, a team, a person, etc. But I'm also not going to let someone just define what success looks like for me.
I so love that. And the three things that I'm hearing you say is number one, believe in yourself. Like that's critical. Number two, know who's in your circle and have some advocates around you. And number three, don't stop. Don't
Yeah,
don't keep your window, small. Instead, keep going.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think when you're also authentic and genuine about the wins, about wanting to have success and lead. Like, Denise, let's not get it twisted, right? The higher you go, the elevation, the closer to the sun you are, it is hot. Okay.
100%.
And it is hot, it is challenging, and it's competitive. And people like power and they want to keep power. So if you want to compete in these spaces, also know why you're doing it. What's your reason and what's your why? If you're only looking to ascend for reasons of vanity or chagrin or just because you want the title, that is not sustainable.
Yeah.
Those things are great, but it will take you out fast. And you will deprioritize the things that continue to make sense for you and make you the wonderful leader or person that you are. So
Yeah.
also while you're leaning into not stopping and having the confidence, also be comfortable to pulse yourself and say, why am I doing this?
Yes.
Why do I want this? For what reasons? Like, what satisfaction does it bring me?
Yeah.
How can I continue being the best version of myself? So those are all just as important as we're looking to ascend, why we want to ascend, and making sure we can answer that authentically for ourselves.
I think understanding the why, when you have that clarity, it really acts as fuel to keep you
Absolutely.
going, to keep you
Absolutely.
moving forward, right? Because it's also about being purposeful, right? I mean, as you
Absolutely.
said, the closer you get to the sun, the hotter it is, and so many different things happen, judgment, right? I mean, criticism, all kinds of things happen when we're in these spaces. But I think understanding the why we're doing it, understanding our core values, and
Mhm.
as you said, like being authentic to
Yeah,
why we're in the space is what's going to keep the engine running.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also there's a degree of servant leadership that
Yes.
needs to be valued in these spaces, in this industry, this environment that we're in, that is extremely myopic, where things are holistically about self and me and my individual well-being. I think there's a lot that gets missed in what it means to actually serve.
Yeah.
I'm in a space where I have the chance to serve a sport, the people and the assets around it, to continue amplifying it. I've worked in many industries where understanding again, why are you doing what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, but who are you also serving? Are you getting the chance to pour into someone else? Are you hoarding information because you want to continue using it as a skill for yourself, but you also got to pay the way? Like in many cases, we didn't get here alone. I talked about my success coming from also learning how to be a great team member, a leader, a champion in my own right, and extend service to other people. If you can't do that, that's a quick shortcut to, stunting your growth. So
Right.
learning how to lead and be a servant leader and pour into other people, particularly in such a space of change in our industry, how people are consuming entertainment, how people are paying, we're basically coming into this space where we're dealing with inflation and people are monitoring their dollars differently.
Yeah.
You really have to recognize, what are you doing to continue leading the others around you as well and making other people better.
Absolutely. You are dropping some gems. I know for myself, I'm going to have to listen to this recording over and over just to get all the notes from it. But thank you. Thank you. Because someone out there, you are going to make a huge difference for them.
Oh, I hope so.
In another interview, I heard you say, I want to represent talented people who are looking for opportunity and access.
Mhm.
What impact do you hope to make, not just in the world of sports, Morgan, but in terms of kicking down doors for other women and people of color in leadership?
I just want people to know that they can. It's really that simple. I promise that I am not trying to disengage or make someone else feel disenfranchised. I just want people to recognize that there's more and there is value in otherness. And if you truly want to know what it feels like to win, sometimes you have to look to your left, to your right, look for otherness to continue complementing what you already have, not necessarily looking at it as a barrier. Particularly as we, talk about this theme of consumption and consumers and, how people are really taking in product. You also have to be comfortable to ask yourself as a leader, who is my consumer? Who do I need to talk to who understands this product better than I do? Who am I addressing? Who is my audience? And if you turn around in the room with decision makers and you don't see any degree of representation in that
Right.
product or in your consumer or who your target audience is, then you are operating at a void, at a deficit. So when I talk about opportunity and access, it's more to give people who are qualified and competent the chance to succeed and contribute, but also giving a leader a chance to look at winning differently and a
Yeah.
chance to, really continue to add value to already what they're creating. And ultimately, that's what it's about. How do we continue to get better in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Morgan Cato, I could talk to you for hours and for days and for weeks. And we are so grateful that you took some time out to spend with us here at the Promoted Podcast. Really appreciate you. And we hope that you will be a friend of the show and come back and see us for a part two.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you creating the space more than anything. Again, going back, we didn't have this. I've learned to grow in this space. I didn't have the direct email access. I didn't have the social connections. I didn't have all of this. So what you're creating right now is really a wonderful tool to help people figure out how to be the best that they can be. So thank you for creating the space.
Well, thank you. And for anyone who's listened to this podcast, and if you think it's going to help someone else, please go ahead and share this episode. And we will be back with you very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.